Thanks for tuning in to leftcoastnews.net. News and information from the wacky, sometimes communist, liberal west coast of the United States. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net.
Well, here's more good news about taxes in Washington and what you can expect in the next year or two. There's an expected slide in the Washington Unemployment Trust Fund balance, which could trigger a new tax. Just what we need. This is from the Washington State Standard. Washington businesses would need to shoulder roughly $700 million in additional taxes in a few years unless the projected finances of the state's unemployment insurance fund improve. Officials are looking at ways to avoid such a scenario. Unemployment is relatively low in Washington, but pandemic-era policies and increased usage during the past couple of years have strained the state's unemployment system, which provides temporary payments to residents who lose their jobs and are looking for new work. Next year, employer taxes going into Washington's Unemployment Trust Fund are expected to total $1.7 billion, while benefit payouts rise to $2.4 billion. Maybe they shouldn't make it so easy to get unemployment. Maybe they need to relook at that. According to the latest actuarial analysis released this month, at the end of September, the trust fund, which only pays benefits and not administrative costs, had about $3.8 billion, totaling 7.9 months of benefits on hand if collections suddenly stopped. As payroll taxes lag payouts, that's projected to drop to 7.1 months by the same time next year and 6.3 in 2027. Therein lies the problem. Dropping below 7 months of benefits on September 30th of a given year triggers a state tax of up to 2.2% on businesses to bring the trust fund back up to a healthy 9 months of payments. As unemployment skyrocketed during the pandemic, this metric plummeted, but the state waived this tax from 2021 through 2025. This would have been the only time it ever could have been levied. That possible solvency surcharge in 2028 and 29 would raise an estimated $350 million each year. It would be applied equally across all employers. News of this potential tax comes as Washington businesses begin to shoulder billions of dollars in new and increased taxes passed this year to fill a shortfall in the state's operating budget. James Crandall, who represents the Association of Washington Business on the state's Unemployment Insurance Advisory Committee, said the Employment Security Department, which runs the program, should be looking at everything it has in its power to mitigate ahead of time. This is really impacting companies' affordability, Crandall said. He questioned the trigger for the tax and suggested the way it would be imposed seems arbitrary. The tax could be triggered a year earlier if that 7.1 month projection next year teeters below 7. Whether that happens is a coin flip. Under the current forecast, the tax would likely remain into the 2030s. The projections are based on relatively stable unemployment that doesn't exceed 5%. Washington's unemployment rate has hovered around 4.5 this year, roughly in line with the national rate. It is far from a foregone conclusion that tax will be needed. A recession or better than expected economic growth would shift the chances of needing the tax. We're not going to have a better than expected economic growth here in Washington. The state is not business friendly. I own businesses for many years in this state. It is not business friendly. They do everything they can to make it as difficult as possible for businesses, and they charge you out the ass for everything they possibly can. The long-range projections give the state time to change course. Do you think they will? Do they ever? The state knows how to do one thing, and that is tax you for everything. Everybody for everything. Everything possible. One solution could come via the legislature. Lawmakers could reduce the trigger for the solvency tax below 7 months. When the tax was first established in the mid-2000s, 6 months was the threshold, but within a few years, legislators upped it to 7. Policymakers could also reduce the threshold for when the solvency tax could end from the current 9 months, or they could extend the years-long waiver on the tax, but that would be a punt rather than a fix. To regain long-term stability, either the economy needs an upswing, so the state has to pay fewer unemployment benefits, or tax collections need to jump. The source of this problem is two-sided. On one hand, people who qualify have been increasingly likely to seek unemployment, and the recipients are more often exhausting their benefits. Applicants can usually get up to 26 weeks of payouts per year. On the other side, policy decisions have been made during the COVID-19 pandemic, which have jeopardized the fund's long-term stability. Washington came into the pandemic with one of the healthiest trust funds in the country. That allowed the state to provide roughly $2.5 billion in tax breaks to employers, money that would have otherwise gone towards Washington's unemployment trust fund. So while many states had to borrow from the federal government to keep unemployment checks flowing, Washington did not, but it also left the fund with much less money. They're going to tax you. They're going to come after business again. And you're going to see an exodus of business. You're going to see an exodus of businesses that shut down. And people don't seem to care. The people in this state seem to think that if you own a business, you must be rich, you must be a millionaire, and that just isn't the case. And if you've never owned a business, you don't understand all that goes into it and the amount of taxes and payouts that you have to deal with in this state. I don't understand why people keep voting for this. What is the disconnect? What is the confusion? Businesses need to keep their money to survive, to hire people. Do you want jobs so you don't have to have these unemployment benefits? But I think there's a lot of lazy people in this state who want to sit around and collect a paycheck because they like the idea of socialism and government support. I don't know what it's going to take to turn people's ideas about business and money around in this state, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. They keep voting for this trash. They want socialism. That's where we're headed. Everybody wants to be on the government tit.